Today's lecture is going to be on resistance training periodization. And hopefully some of this is a review for you. And if you've never learned about periodization, then if you do have questions, let's go over that a little bit during lab. So I'll first go over the different types of periodization, including definitions for them. And then we're going to go over different types of additional dynamic training models that you can incorporate with your client. So first off, what is periodization? It's a strategy to promote long-term training and performance, that's key, with pre-planned systematic variations in training, specificity, intensity, and volume organization in periods or cycles within an overall program. Essentially, what you need to know about periodization is that it's very specified and tailored training for long-term programs. So if you're working with a client who ultimately has these long-term goals, and oftentimes when we think about periodization, we're thinking about people like athletes who have very specific tailored time periods of which they have to train, things that they have to train for. So if you're working with a client who maybe is training for a triathlon, or who has a bodybuilding competition or powerlifting competition, periodization is probably a very smart tool for you to use with your client. Now, when you think about what periodization is made up of, it's made up of multiple different components. Within about a 9 to 12 month period, you have your macro cycles. Then within that macro cycle, you actually have these multiple Mezzo cycles. And Mezzo cycles last anywhere between 3 to 6 weeks, or all the way up to 3 to 4 months, depending on what you're training for. So to be clear, your Mezzo cycles are what make up your macro cycles. And then what you can see here is that your microcycles are actually what make up your mesocycles, right? So your microcycles are those 1 to 4 week periods that you're going to be really thinking specifically about what they're doing within that 1 to 4 week period. And then within those microcycles are your actual individual sessions. So when you think about creating a periodized program for your client, it is very detailed, and you have to think about the big picture and all the little steps that go down into your small picture, which is what you're used to thinking about, which is individual sessions. So periodization, to be clear, isn't just, oh, I think we're going to do bis and tris today. It's very tailored. You're doing bis and tris today because of this, that, and the other, and you can link that individual session to the microcycle, to the mesocycle, and to the macrocycle. And in fact, there are many different corporations that are hiring personal trainers who have this specialty because it's something that a lot of personal trainers know about, but they don't necessarily utilize with their clients. Periodization is thought of to be used with strength and conditioning. So more and more personal trainers are looking to start using periodization within their clients, and places like Equinox are really thinking and asking their personal trainers to have this skill set. So again, this is just kind of a definition of those macro, meso, and micro cycles. Macro cycles, again, are those 9 to 12 month intervals. They include all 4 stages of periodization training, and those 4 stages are going to include muscular endurance. It's going to have a hypertrophy phase, a strength phase, and a power phase. So it's really important that you understand that these macro cycles include all 4 stages. So muscular endurance, hypertrophy, strength phase, and power. Important that you know all 4 of those, okay? And again, your macro cycle is your bird's eye view of your training. Okay, so again, you're gonna be able to look at that and see for 9 to 12 months, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. Your mesocycles are going to be those 3 to 6 week or 3 to 4 month intervals, again, depending on what your client's training for. And those are what comprise those macro cycles. And remembering that these are designed to help accomplish a very specific tailored goal. So for instance, we might have a goal of, your client might have a goal of improving their FTE, which is their functional threshold power. And if your client is working for more endurance-based programming. So if you have a cyclist, FTE is something that they are probably looking into, and essentially what they're trying to get with functional threshold power is their highest average power that they can sustain over a period of time. Usually that's an hour. So for cyclists, right, they're going to look at their watts, which is a measure of power, and they're going to try to see how much they can sustain within that hour. So this is an example of a specific goal that you would include in your mesocycle. Okay, and I wanted to give you a cardiovascular example because I think a lot of times when we think about periodization, we only think about resistance training, but periodization is used in endurance athletes as well. So it's important that we kind of think about that. And then your microcycles are the 1 to 4 week intervals that are comprise your Mezzo Cycles. And again, so they're kind of like building blocks for one another. And those are focused blocks of training. So they could be, an example would be an endurance block. So a cyclist has 3 to 4 long rides together in 1 week, and then that progressively adds volume or training volume to their overall training program. Okay, so microcycles are what make up your mesocycles, mesocycles are what make up your macrocycles, and then your specific individual sessions are what go into those microcycles. So when we think about our dynamic training models, we're really thinking 2 things. First, our first goal is we want to maximize our gains in strength, power, endurance, and hypertrophy. Okay, so those are, again, are those 4 components that go into your periodization. So maximizing strength, power, endurance, and hypertrophy. Our second goal is we want to reduce the risk of injury. So one of the biggest reasons why we include things like periodization is so that we don't overtrain our clients, that we make sure they are having adequate rest, and that we're training them in a way that's going to enhance their skills and their performance in whatever that they're trying to train for. Okay, so making sure there's rest periods between those sets and exercises that are kind of directly applied and related to the intensity that you're using. And there are, this is important to know, 3 common periodization models. There's linear, reverse linear, and undulated. So to be clear, linear, reverse linear, and undulated. So we are going to pause right now. The next lecture is actually going to dive into all 3 of those in a little bit more detail.